She was soaked, shivering, clutching two crying babies on a freezing street corner, so he handed her the keys to his mansion and boarded his jet. But when he came back, nothing could have prepared him for what he found waiting inside. Julian Woolf adjusted the cuffs of his designer suit as the rain tapped gently on the tinted windows of the Rolls-Royce. He was en route to the airport, private jet-fueled, deals waiting in Singapore. The city flickered by, a blur of neon lights and water-streaked glass. He didn't notice the storm until it bled into the car, until he looked up. At the corner of 56th and Blake, just past the intersection his chauffeur never stopped at, a shape caught his eye. A woman, ragged, barefoot, soaked to the bone, clutching two little girls under her torn coat. Twins, no older than 4, one crying, the other shivering. "Stop the car," Julian said abruptly. His driver, Graham, glanced up in the rearview mirror. "Sir? Just stop the damn car." The vehicle rolled to a halt at the curb. Raindrops smacked the windshield like gunfire. Julian had no umbrella, no plan, no idea what he was doing. But something in her expression, a haunted, broken thing, reached through his expensive armor and struck something buried inside. She looked up as he stepped out, wary, protective. Her arms tightened around her daughter's. He crouched, his $3,000 shoes soaking in street runoff. "Do you have anywhere to go?" She hesitated. "We're fine." The lie was so brittle it nearly shattered in her throat. Julian reached into his coat and pulled out his leather key fob. "Take this," he said, pressing it into her hand. "It's for my house in Riverview Hills. There's food, heat, rooms. No one's there." Her eyes narrowed. "Is this a joke?" "No, I'm leaving town. Just—" He looked at the children. One had fallen asleep, cheeks pink from cold. "Let them be warm." She stared at the keys, then at him. "What's the catch?" "No catch," he said softly. "Just don't break anything." He walked back to the car before she could say another word. His hands trembled as he shut the door. He didn't know her name, but as the rolls pulled away and she vanished in the side mirror, a hollow space inside his chest pulsed like it was waking up. Celine Hart stood in the freezing rain, staring at the keys. The man was gone, vanished into the dark like some ghost from a fable. Her girls whimpered beneath her coat, their tiny bodies pressed against hers. She should throw the keys away. People like him didn't help people like her. Men didn't give you things without expecting to take something else in return. But her girls were freezing, and she was so tired. 3 buses, and 2 miles later, she stood in front of a wrought-iron gate, guarded by security cameras and a polished brass plaque that read, "Wolf Estate." The gate opened when she entered the code on the keychain. And there it was. A mansion, palatial, stone and glass, lit softly from within like a painting. She stepped inside, trembling. The warmth hit her like a wave. There was food in the fridge, clean linens, a fireplace. Her girls made a sound she hadn't heard in weeks. They laughed. For a moment, Celine stood frozen at the door, the keys still in her hand. Like if she moved, it would all vanish. Julian Woolf, 2 days later, sat alone in his hotel suite in Singapore, sipping scotch and staring at nothing. He should feel powerful. He'd just signed a $600 million merger, but he couldn't stop thinking about her. Those eyes, that rain, those children. He checked his security app for the 10th time. Still there. Motion in the East Wing, a toy on the floor, a kettle steaming, and something else. Laughter. He closed the app, and for the first time in years, he smiled. If you were in Julian's shoes, would you have trusted a stranger with your home or kept driving? Drop your honest reaction in the comments below. What would you do? Julian's jet landed on a slate-grey morning, rain pooling in waves on the tarmac like it had been waiting for him. He stepped off the plane with his bag slung over his shoulder, an odd tension curling in his chest. It wasn't business. That had gone flawlessly. This was something else, something personal. The car ride to Riverview Hills was unusually quiet. The road curved through thick forest before opening to the cliffside mansion. As they approached the gate, he saw them, tiny handprints on the stone pillars, crayon marks on the security post. He felt something stir. The front door was unlocked. Julian pushed it open and stood completely still. Laughter drifted down the marble hallway. Children's laughter. A trail of glitter and pillow stuffing led into the great room. A stuffed bear was upside down on the grand piano. Someone had drawn a face on the marble bust of Mozart in the entryway, in pink lipstick. His house was alive. Julian set his suitcase down slowly. He could smell cinnamon. Was that cookies? A blur of motion streaked past, then another. Two little girls in matching pajamas screamed, "He's here! It's the key man!" Before one darted under the couch and the other ran straight into his legs. She looked up at him, breathless. Her curls were wild, cheeks flushed with joy. "You came back," she whispered. "I did," he said, stunned. "Mommy said you were a prince." He didn't know what to say. Before he could, she appeared at the top of the stairs. Celine, hair damp from a shower, wearing a clean white sweater that hung off one shoulder, the kind of soft clothes she hadn't worn in years. She froze when she saw him. A moment passed, heavy, silent. "I was going to leave before you got back," she said quickly, descending the stairs. "I swear, we cleaned everything. The girls just—" Her voice cracked, and just like that, she stopped pretending not to care. "I didn't know where else to go." Julian looked around. The floors were mopped. The kitchen gleamed. The sheets on the guest bed were folded military tight. Someone had even polished the glass on the upstairs landing. "You cleaned all this?" She nodded, defensive. "We stayed out of your room. We weren't trying to take anything. I just wanted them to be warm, to feel safe." "You cooked?" he asked. "Dinner, most nights. I didn't want the groceries to go bad." He stepped forward. The house that had once echoed with silence now pulsed with life, with memories he hadn't even lived through. "Julian, I get it. You were being kind. One-time thing. I won't make it messy. We'll go." "No." The word surprised even him. Celine blinked. "I mean,
What?
Don't go." He ran a hand through his hair, flustered. "I didn't expect this, but it's not bad. You don't even know us." "I know I haven't smiled in 3 years until I opened that door," he said, softer than before. She didn't answer, and then one of the twins, the quieter one, tugged on his pant leg. "Do you know how to make forts?" Julian stared down at her. "No," he said, the corner of his mouth twitching, "but maybe you can teach me." That night, Julian walked the halls of his own house like a guest. There were drawings on the fridge, a bowl of homemade soup left out for him, a princess sticker on the bottom of his Italian leather loafer. He stopped in front of the fireplace where a folded quilt lay on the couch. On top sat a note, scribbled in blue marker. "We didn't mean to break Mozart's nose. Sorry. Lila Claire." He let out a breath that sounded suspiciously like a laugh, and something in his chest cracked open a little wider. Meanwhile, Celine lay awake in the guest room. Julian was kind, but he didn't owe her anything. And men like him didn't stick around. She'd seen it before, but something about him tonight, how he looked at her like he didn't know whether to scold her or thank her, it shook her. Maybe he wasn't like the others. Maybe. At this point, what do you think Julian should do? Follow his pride and boundaries, or follow his heart and let them stay? Let us know in the comments. What would you choose? The next morning, Julian sat at the breakfast table, dressed in his usual tailored perfection, scrolling through back-to-back emails as a soft clatter echoed behind him. Celine was in the kitchen again, barefoot, sleeves rolled up, flipping pancakes like she belonged there, which she didn't. Not really. Not in his world. "Morning," she said, her voice careful. "Morning," he replied, not looking up. The girls were still asleep, the house quiet except for the occasional sizzle from the pan. Celine glanced over. "You can tell me to leave, you know. You don't have to keep pretending this is fine." "I'm not pretending," Julian said, then paused. "I'm adjusting." "To what?" He looked at her. "Noise. Stickers on my shoes. Tiny people stealing my socks." She smirked. You found the sock gremlins. Julian tried to smile. He did, but something in his expression pulled tight again. A flicker of distance. He stood up. I have meetings today. Don't wait on me for anything. Celine blinked, the shift hitting harder than it should have. Right. Of course you have your life. He grabbed his keys, nodded once, and walked out the door without another word. Julian, in his car, clenched the steering wheel harder than necessary. He wasn't angry at her, or the kids, or even the absurdity of the situation. He was angry at himself because he liked it. The laughter, the smells, the human presence in a home that had once felt like a tomb with floor heating. And that was the problem. Because if he let himself get used to it, he wouldn't know how to go back to silence, and eventually they'd leave. Everyone always left. Celine, meanwhile, stared at the empty chair across the table. 1,000 memories tried to crawl out from under her skin, memories of men who acted kind then turned cold, of shelters that booted her out after 3 days, of promises that unraveled the moment she believed in them. She'd told herself she wouldn't hope, not this time, but last night. The way he looked at the girls, the softness in his voice, the soup, the fort. She'd let herself imagine. Just for a second. But mornings had a way of making fairy tales feel stupid. That evening Julian came home late. The lights were off. He expected silence. Instead, the faint sound of music drifted down the hallway. Not classical, not jazz. Moon River. He followed it to the sitting room. There, under a blanket fort made of sofa cushions and gold-threaded curtains, was a flickering glow. Celine sat cross-legged on the floor, one twin asleep against her chest, the other curled beside her. She was humming softly, her eyes closed, fingers gently stroking their hair. Julian didn't speak, didn't move. Something inside him fractured. She looked up. Their eyes met through the thin veil of the blanket fort. She whispered, "You're late." "I didn't know there was a curfew." She smiled, but it was tired, guarded. He crouched outside the fort, his voice low. "I can stay downstairs tonight if this is too crowded." "You live here," she said, "and you don't?" Her lips parted, then closed again. He could see the wall building behind her eyes. She was retreating. "Don't do that," he said softly. "Do what?" "Shut down. I can see it happening." She held his gaze. "It's easier than getting used to something that's not going to last." The silence between them stretched taut. Julian whispered, "What if I don't want you to leave?" Celine blinked. Her breath hitched, but then she shook her head like snapping out of a dream. "You don't know us, Julian. You don't know what we've been through." "Then tell me." She stood, gathering the sleeping children in her arms. "Not tonight." Julian sat alone on the couch long after they disappeared upstairs. He picked up one of the drawings they left on the floor. It was him. A stick figure with a crown, holding hands with 2 little girls and a woman with curly hair. He stared at it for a long time, then placed it on the mantel. What would you do in Julian's place? Shut it down before it hurts, or lean in and risk everything? The storm hit hard and fast. By mid-afternoon, the winds were howling through Riverview Hills like wolves, rattling windows and bending the trees like twigs. Julian stood in his home office, watching the rain flood down the hillside, soaking the garden paths in a rising tide of mud. The news called it the worst flash flood in a decade. Roads out were already closed, so much for escaping back to the city. He turned from the window and sighed. He was stuck. With them. Celine appeared in the doorway not 10 seconds later, holding a flashlight and a tangle of extension cords. "I think the power's about to go," she said. "Generator will kick in," Julian muttered, moving to his desk. She stood there, fidgeting. "The girls are scared." He looked up. "Of the storm? Of everything? They've never been in a place like this. This big, this fragile." That word hit oddly in his ears. Fragile. This house. He opened his mouth to say something distant, safe, controlled. But what came out was different. "I could read to them." Celine blinked. "You read?" "I own books," he replied dryly. "I own Band-Aids. Doesn't mean I'm a doctor." He cracked a small smile, the first in hours. She hesitated, then said, "They'd like that." 30 minutes later, Julian was awkwardly folded onto the floor of the twins' room, surrounded by stuffed animals, pink blankets, and two very curious, very wide-eyed little girls. And the bear said, "Who's been eating my porridge?" he read, voice low and serious. Claire gasped. Lila giggled. Celine sat just outside the room, listening, watching. He was stiff at first, wooden, but something changed by page 4. His voice softened. He did character voices. He didn't rush. And when both girls fell asleep, heads on either side of his lap, Julian froze, unsure of how to move without waking them. Celine entered slowly, holding her breath. She saw him sitting there, completely still, two small hands tangled in his shirt. "You don't have to stay like that," she whispered. "I don't want to wake them." He looked up at her, and something passed between them. An ache, an understanding. She knelt beside him, gently freeing the girl's hands. Together, in silence, they tucked the twins in. It felt oddly intimate. When they stepped into the hallway, Julian rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't know what I'm doing. With them. With any of this." Celine nodded, then leaned against the wall. "Welcome to parenthood." He laughed softly. "How do you do it?" "Badly. Desperately. But with love." Julian stared at her, something raw behind his eyes. "No one ever fought for me like that." "You were a kid," he nodded. "And your parents?" "Busy. Distant. Dead, eventually." Silence. "I think that's why I keep people out," he said. "If they never get close, they can't leave." Celine's voice was barely audible. "Some of us didn't have the luxury of building walls. We had to survive with everything wide open." Another silence, deeper now. Then, a crack of thunder. The lights flickered and went out. The generator took 5 seconds to kick in, but in those 5 seconds, it was just them, in darkness. Celine's hand brushed his. They didn't move, didn't speak. Then the lights buzzed back to life, and they both stepped away at the same time. Too quickly. "Long night," she muttered. "Yeah. I'll make tea." "Okay." But neither of them moved. Later, in the kitchen, they sat across from each other with mugs in hand, the storm pounding against the windows, wind howling like a warning. Julian stared into the steam. "Do you think I'm crazy?" Celine shook her head. "No." "Then what do you think I am?" She studied him for a long time. "Lonely." That hit harder than he expected. "You hide it well," she added, "but I see it. In the way you walk around this house like a stranger, in the way you gave the keys to a woman you didn't even know." "I thought I was helping you." "You were," she said, "but maybe you were helping yourself too." He didn't deny it. She didn't press. They just sat there, two people with bruised pasts and guarded hearts, waiting. At this point, what do you think he should do? Follow his pride or follow his heart? Let us know in the comments below. The next morning arrived slowly, dragging a heavy grey light behind it. The storm had passed, but left the world waterlogged and breathless. Branches scattered the driveway. The garden looked like it had taken a punch. The silence was almost suspicious. Celine stood in the kitchen, sipping coffee, barefoot again. Julian noticed that about her, how she never wore shoes inside, like she didn't fully believe she belonged here and might need to run at any moment. She hadn't said much since the storm. Neither had he. Too many unsaid things between them. "Claire had a nightmare," she finally said, not looking up. "Woke up crying, said she thought the roof was going to fall." Julian frowned. "That's not just about the storm, is it?" "No," she said. "It never is." She set her mug down, slow and deliberate. "I should tell you something." Julian leaned against the counter, arms folded. "Okay." She took a breath, eyes locked on the tile. "We ran. I didn't just end up homeless. I left. On purpose. He didn't interrupt. My ex, the twins' father, he's not in jail, he's not dead. He's out there. Somewhere. Julian stiffened. He never hit the girls, she continued, but he came close. Too close. And me? It wasn't just bruises. It was silence, control, the kind that wraps around your ribs and squeezes. Julian closed his eyes briefly. I stayed too long. I told myself it was for them. But truth, I was scared. Scared of starting over with nothing, of not being believed, of being blamed. Her voice broke slightly. So one day I grabbed a backpack, 2 juice boxes, and I walked out the door. She looked at him finally. That's who I am. Not some fairy tale you rescued from a puddle. I never thought you were. Celine shook her head. You should know, in case this starts to feel like something more than temporary. Julian stepped forward, slow and measured. I already know it's more than temporary. Celine looked away. People say that, before it gets hard. I don't run from hard. You run from real, she said sharply. From closeness. From the idea that someone might see the cracks in you. That stopped him. She hit something, something buried. He turned his back briefly, jaw tight. You think I gave you those keys because I'm some saint? No, she whispered. I think you gave them to me because you wanted to believe you could still feel something. He faced her again, his voice low. You're right. Celine's breath caught. I've built this fortress of money, silence and marble, he said. But it doesn't warm me, doesn't talk back, doesn't fall asleep on my lap with juice stains and ask for bedtime stories. A flicker of something warm crossed her face. I used to come home, Julian said quietly, to silence so thick I could hear my heartbeat in the walls. He looked away again. My mother died young. My father married 4 more times, each colder than the last, and every time I promised myself I'd never need anyone the way he did. He laughed bitterly. Turns out needing someone isn't weakness, it's living. I just forgot how. Celine swallowed. I think I did too. There it was, raw, open, no performance, no careful pacing, just pain meeting pain in the middle. She walked toward him slowly. Julian didn't move. She was close enough to touch him, but didn't. Instead, she whispered, I don't want your pity. You don't have it. Then what do I have? His voice was a whisper. Everything I didn't know I was missing. That night, Julian found an old photo album tucked behind one of the office shelves, one of the only things he hadn't thrown away after the estate lawyers handled the wills. Dusty, heavy, unopened in years. He flipped through it alone, sitting on the floor with a glass of wine. Photos of him as a boy, quiet, sullen, rare smiles. One photo made him pause. It was him at age 8, standing next to a woman who looked eerily like Celine, kind eyes, wild hair, his biological mother. She was laughing. Julian wasn't, but her hand was on his shoulder. She looked so alive. He stared at it for a long time. Then, without really knowing why, he brought the album upstairs. Celine was folding laundry in the guest room. He held the album out. This was my mom. She looked at the image, then back at him. She was beautiful. She died in a car accident. I was 10. I'm sorry. Julian shrugged. I don't talk about her. Why now? Because you reminded me what it felt like to be safe. She blinked and he added, that photo, her hand on my shoulder, that's the last time I remember feeling it. Until here. Now. Neither of them moved. The moment stretched, soft and charged. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too, he said. And that was enough. For now. The days that followed felt different, gentler. The air inside the Wolf estate no longer echoed with silence, but with the soft chaos of life. Julian found himself waking to the smell of toast and orange juice, not espresso and dread. He started reading the girls' stories before bed, not after they were already asleep. His assistant kept sending him texts about missed board meetings, but he barely looked at them. Celine had carved out a rhythm in his home without force, without taking up more space than she needed, and somehow she'd taken up all of it. One morning, Julian walked into the kitchen to find her dancing with a spatula in one hand and a twin in each arm, giggling wildly to Whitney Houston on the Bluetooth speaker. He paused at the doorway, mesmerized. Celine looked over and froze mid-spin. "Oh, God," she laughed. "I forgot you live here." He smirked. "Should I come back later?" "Nope. You saw too much. Now I have to kill you." The girls erupted in laughter. Julian stepped forward, mock serious. "Then I demand a last meal." "Pancakes?" "With chocolate chips." She gave a mock curtsy. "As you wish, my liege." That afternoon, they took a walk around the garden, the sun finally strong enough to dry the storm's destruction. Claire and Lila chased butterflies between hedges, shouting excitedly about fairies. Julian walked beside Celine, hands in pockets. She noticed him watching the girls. "They love you, you know." He looked down. "I'm not good with kids." "You're not perfect. That's different." Julian gave her a sidelong glance. "Do you really think this could work?" Celine didn't answer right away. Then, "I think I'm tired of waiting for the perfect moment. Perfect doesn't exist. But real? This feels real." That word, real, made something warm bloom in his chest. They sat under the oak tree and watched the girls run through puddles barefoot. Celine rested her head against his shoulder just for a second. He didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't run. That evening, after the girls were asleep, they sat by the fire. Not talking much, just being. Julian handed her a glass of red wine. "You know," she said softly, "it's been almost 4 years since someone brought me a glass of anything, without expecting something in return. I didn't bring it for thanks." "I know. That's why it means something." He turned to her. "What do you want, Celine? After all this?" She stared into the fire. "Peace. A place where I don't have to look over my shoulder, where my girls can grow up not knowing what fear smells like." Julian's voice was quiet. "And love." She looked at him, then whispered, "That too, but I've stopped expecting it." He reached out, tentatively taking her hand. "You shouldn't." She smiled, just barely. "Julian, if you're not careful, I might start believing you." He brought her hand to his lips, kissed the back gently. "Then believe me." That night, Julian didn't sleep in the West Wing. He stayed in the guest room, on the floor at first. But Celine pulled the blanket aside without a word. He climbed in beside her, careful, reverent. They didn't kiss, they just held each other, like people who knew what it meant to lose everything, and for once didn't have to. The next morning, Julian woke to the feeling of small hands poking his face. "Lila." She grinned. "You look funny when you sleep." Julian blinked. "That's slander." Claire appeared next. "Can we make pancakes again?" He groaned. "Only if someone else flips them this time." From the bathroom, Celine called out, "You burned one batch and now you're traumatized." "I'm just protecting the children." Celine laughed, warm and real. It echoed down the hallway, and Julian thought, this is what love must sound like. Later that day, they painted the guest room, transforming it into a real bedroom for the twins. Celine wore one of his old t-shirts, paint streaking her arms. Julian kept accidentally smudging her cheeks with color. At one point, he leaned in to wipe off a dot of blue. Their eyes met. No walls, no fear. Just two souls. Healing. Do you think love can grow even in the most unlikely places? Let us know your thoughts below. What does home mean to you? The morning started like any other. Julian was in the garden, kneeling beside Claire and Lila as they tried to bury magic rocks near the hydrangeas. Celine watched from the patio, coffee in hand, eyes soft with something dangerously close to love. But peace doesn't last forever, and monsters never stay buried. The knock at the gate came just before noon. A black SUV, tinted windows. Security footage showed a man in a leather jacket pacing by the entrance, yelling into the call box, demanding access. Julian narrowed his eyes. Then the man said a name, Celine, and everything stopped. Julian brought her the footage, quiet, tense. "Do you know this man?" Celine's hands trembled slightly as she pressed play. Her ex. Julian saw her flinch. "He found us," she whispered. Julian stood frozen. "He knows you're here." "I don't know how." "Did you tell anyone where you were?" "No," she said, too fast. "I swear I didn't. Maybe someone at the shelter, or the girls said something at the park." Julian's voice was hard now, controlled. "You should have told me this was a possibility. I didn't think he'd come looking. You didn't think—" He stopped himself, ran a hand through his hair. "Celine, there are children here. You put them in danger. You put me in danger." Her eyes filled. "I didn't ask for your protection, Julian. You offered it. And you withheld the truth." Silence. Then she said it, quiet but firm. "I'm not the only one who's been hiding." That landed like a slap. Julian stiffened. "What's that supposed to mean?" Celine stepped forward. "This whole time you've been carefully choosing what you show. You let us in, but only just enough. You gave us a house, not a future, a room, not a promise." His jaw tightened. "I was trying." "Were you? Or were you playing family until the next flight out?" Julian's voice cracked. "That's not fair." "No," she said. "It's honest." That night, the house was silent again. Too silent. Julian stood in the doorway of the guest room. It was empty. No Celine, no girls. Just a folded note on the bed. "Julian, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. Any of it. Not the house. Not the nights. Not you. But the moment he showed up, I saw it in your face. You were never going to see me as anything but someone who needed saving. And I can't survive being someone's rescue project. Not again. You opened your door to me. You gave my daughters warmth. And for that, I will never stop being grateful. But you deserve someone who doesn't come with shadows in tow. And I deserve a life that doesn't live in fear. So we're going. Because I'd rather leave with the memory of being loved, for a little while, than stay and watch you pull away one silent inch at a time." Celine Julian sat down on the edge of the bed, hands shaking. The silence he'd once cherished returned like a knife. Meanwhile, Celine sat in the back of a Greyhound bus headed east, her girls asleep beside her. She watched the trees blur past through the window, every leaf a heartbeat, every mile a goodbye. She whispered, mostly to herself, "It was real, for a while." And it broke that night. Julian stood alone in the garden, staring down at the magic rock the girls had buried. He dug it up with his bare hands, held it in his palm. It was just a stone, painted pink, with the word home written in shaky marker. His breath caught, and for the first time in years, he cried. Julian didn't leave the house for 2 days. Not because he couldn't, because he didn't know where he would go that wouldn't feel like her. The kitchen still smelled like cinnamon. There was glitter on the guest room doorknob. The fridge still had 2 drawings magnet-pinned with the word Julian spelled wrong in crayon. Everything hurt, but mostly the silence. The silence that used to protect him now punished him. He paced the halls at night, restless, sleepless, angry, at her, at himself, at the idea that he could feel so hollow after something that wasn't supposed to mean anything. Except it did. It meant everything. She had said he gave them a house, not a future, and she was right. He'd built walls around his heart for so long, he didn't know how to invite anyone in. He gave her safety, warmth, but not certainty, not love he dared to name. He hadn't said the words, not once, and now they were gone. On a bus miles away, Celine watched her girls sleep against her shoulders, their heads heavy with exhaustion. They were safer now, she knew that, but she wasn't. She felt like a ghost again, passing through spaces, floating between fear and numbness. She remembered the sound Julian made when he kissed her hand for the first time, like he couldn't believe what he was holding. She remembered the way he laughed when she stole his tie and made Lila wear it like a scarf. She remembered the quiet in his eyes when he said, "You reminded me what it felt like to be safe." And for the first time since leaving, she reached for her phone. No messages, no calls. She set it down again. "Don't beg for crumbs, Celine." She closed her eyes and tried not to cry. Back at the estate, Julian stood at the front door, holding a small piece of paper. The note she left. He'd read it 30 times, maybe more. Each time a different line cut deeper. "You deserve someone who doesn't come with shadows in tow," he whispered aloud. "But I loved your shadows." He finally opened his phone, typed her name into a blank message, paused, deleted it, then tried again. "Julian, I didn't give you the keys to my house. I gave them to my heart. I just didn't know it yet. Tell me where you are. I'll come. I'll fight. Even if it's too late, I need you to know. You weren't a guest here. You were home." He hit send and waited. 1 hour, nothing. 2 hours, nothing. Midnight, still nothing. He left the porch light on anyway. Celine sat in a diner off the interstate. Her phone buzzed once, face down on the table. She didn't check it. Not yet. She wiped syrup off Claire's chin, braided Lila's hair. When the girls were distracted with coloring books, she flipped the phone over. One message. "Julian." She read it once, twice. Then a tear slid down her cheek, silent, hot. A waitress approached. "You okay, honey?" Celine looked up. "I don't know." "Someone hurt you?" Celine shook her head. "Someone told me the truth." The waitress smiled, kind and tired. Sometimes that's the beginning, not the end. That night, Celine sat in a motel bed beside her daughters. They were asleep. She stared at the ceiling, heart in her throat. Then she reached for the phone and typed, "Celine, it's not too late, but I'm not asking you to come save me. I'm asking you to stand beside me. If you can do that, we'll be waiting." Julian stared at the message when it came in. Then he grabbed his coat, keys, wallet, and ran. The sky over the Riverview bus depot was still dark when Julian's car screeched to a stop at the curb. He jumped out, scanning the lot with frantic eyes. Then he saw them. Celine, Claire, Lila. Bundled up on a bench, 2 backpacks at their feet. One girl asleep on Celine's lap. The other coloring in a tattered notebook. Celine looked up and saw him. She stood slowly. No dramatic running, no sweeping music, just a silence so deep it hummed. Julian walked up, breath short, wet hair stuck to his forehead. "I came. I know. I don't have anything prepared to say." "Good," she whispered. "I don't want a speech." Julian reached into his pocket, held something out to her. It was the original key, the one he had handed her on that rainy night, the one that started all of this. Her fingers closed around it, but she didn't look at it. She looked at him. "You sure?" she asked, voice trembling. "This isn't charity, it isn't guilt. I won't live in a memory." "It's not charity," Julian said. "It's a choice." He took a step closer. "This house, that key. I thought I was giving you shelter, but I was the one being rescued. I just didn't know it yet." Celine's eyes filled. "You were scared." "I still am." She reached for his hand. "I am too." Behind them, Claire stirred. "Is he coming with us?" Celine looked down, smiled. "No, baby. We're going with him." Back at the estate, Julian walked through the front door first, flipping on the lights. Celine and the girls followed slowly. He turned to them. "This place isn't a mansion. Not anymore. It's home. Yours. If you want it." Lila peeked around him. "Can we still have pancake sundaes?" Julian laughed. "Only if someone else flips them." Celine raised an eyebrow. "You're never letting that go, huh?" "Absolutely not." In the weeks that followed, the house transformed again, but this time intentionally. A swing set went up in the backyard. The guest room was painted purple and covered in glow-in-the-dark stars. The kitchen smelled like life, burnt toast, crayons, vanilla candles, and messy love. One night, Julian found Celine on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the moon. He joined her quietly, sitting beside her without a word. They watched the stars for a while. Then she whispered, I used to think love was something you had to earn, or beg for, or survive. He took her hand gently. And now? I think maybe it's something you choose. And choose again, even when it's scary. He turned toward her. I choose you, Celine Hart. A pause. I choose you too, Julian Wolfe. A few days later, Julian surprised the girls with a small wooden box. They opened it to find a tiny silver key engraved with the word forever. What's this for? Lila asked. Julian smiled. It's the key to your room, your house, your story. No one can ever take it away now. Claire held it like a treasure. Does Mommy get one too? He turned to Celine and handed her a ring. Simple, elegant, timeless. She didn't say yes. She didn't need to. She just walked into his arms and let the moment hold them both. Weeks later, a family photo was framed and hung near the staircase. Not perfect. One girl mid-blink. Celine's hair a little wild. Julian laughing with his head tilted back. Real. Beautiful. Home. Do you believe true love can survive even after being tested this hard? We'd love to hear your story in the comments. Has love ever surprised you?